Good morning, everybody, and welcome to class this morning. I was looking back at all the different live streams we've done up until this point. And we've done several live streams to get us to where we are at this point into the semester. I thought it was really neat. I kind of tried this out as an experiment this semester. And so far, I think it's been going pretty well. Being able to have the opportunity to interact with you all, whether or not you're able to show up, is another thing. But, just being able to provide this opportunity for you all to kind of show up, get a little more information about some of the stuff that we're looking at in the module. And, having the opportunity to interact back and forth. It's pretty cool. So I've really enjoyed doing this live stream thing so far, and I hope you all have enjoyed having the opportunity to look at these live streams and or attend these live streams up until this point. And we'll be continuing to do them for the rest of the semester. One thing that I want to point out as we get started, as kind of an announcement type thing, is to make sure that you are looking at the final project for the course. With the technical writing module in our rear view mirror, we've kind of covered all of the skills, for the most part, that you need to be able to complete the final projects that we have out there. And these are relatively large final projects that we have that you have to do. So it's good to start looking at those now so you can start working on them just a little bit along. So you're not waiting until the last minute and having to, break out a 15-page paper or a 25-slide presentation with a 5-page reflection at the last minute. So I want to encourage you all to make sure that you're looking at that final project now. It's been up in the course, and it's been available for you to look at and work on since the start of the course. So, I don't really want to hear anybody saying, I didn't have enough time to do it, because, it's been up there and available for you to look at and start thinking about and planning and starting to do since day one, right? So, if you haven't done anything yet, we're probably a little past time for you to start thinking about it, but now definitely start thinking about it, start planning, start working on stuff, so you're not rushing to try to get everything in at the end. So this week we're talking about product evaluation strategies. As I kind of mentioned in the post to kind of get our week kicked off, there are times as a help desk and computer training support specialist that you're going to be asked to purchase or to provide your input on purchasing some sort of new product, some sort of new hardware, some sort of new software, or you're going to be asked, to help somebody select a product that meets their needs. Because, you as the support specialist, or you as the one who does computer training, you're the one with that sort of expertise. So in that regard, you have to be able to kind of understand how to evaluate all this stuff, understand how to pick the right products, the right hardware, the right software, the right solutions to meet people's needs so that, everything is working and under control. And that's what we're examining today. And really that's what we're going to start talking about here is we're going to talk about user support, the role of user support in product standards. So product standards, we have a minimum level of what we would expect for us to upkeep in terms of the types of products that we purchase, whether they be hardware, whether they be software, whether they be some kind of technology services. We have a minimum expectation as to what these things need to be to meet the needs of our clients, to meet the needs of our end users. And it's our responsibility as user support to have some say in what these standards are. Because as I've mentioned, you have the expertise. You are the expert. You are the specialist. You're hired into this role because you have a certain set of skills. And that certain set of skills gives you the expertise, gives you that knowledge to evaluate competing products that other workers in the building might not have. I mean, think about it. When you think about, even people who are in administration, even people who are, it's their job on a day-to-day basis to make decisions. Right? When you think about it at that sort of level, you have people who are, in their 50s and 60s who may not be on the cutting edge of technology, who knows what kind of new advances have been made in certain areas. They'd be making decisions on things that they don't really know that much about. They're hired for their expertise in certain areas. School administration's hired for their expertise in running schools. Business administration, bosses at, in business are hired for their expertise in running a business. They're not necessarily hired for their expertise in knowing about computers and technology. But do you know who is? You are, as a computer training and support specialist. So even the people who, it's their job to make decisions day to day, they don't have this kind of specialized training that you do. So that's what brings you into this role of product evaluation and determining product standards. And so what we're doing is we're eliminating a duplication of effort. Because you might get those people who know, who don't know as much about the technology, and, they might come up with some standards and implement those. And that requires effort in and of itself. That could take days, weeks, months of planning, committee meetings, red tape to try to get implemented, only for them to find out that, when they have what they think is a good solution, that it's not going to work. Or that there's something even better that would be the same price or maybe even cheaper if, they had a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of expertise about the situation. So when that new information is introduced, then you just have to restart the cycle and do all of that effort once again. So if you start out with the user support, the ones who are the experts in this role, doing this sort of thing, you don't have that duplication of effort. Support workers can also act as a liaison between users and the IT staff at large, to represent the viewpoints of each group. When you look at like the help desk, a help desk role is sort of this in-between state. Like, yes, you are the experts, you're the IT staff, you have this specialized knowledge, but you also interact with, on a daily basis, your end users, your clients, people in the real world come to you on a daily basis talking about their needs, talking about areas where they have things that they need support on. And so you can take these concerns, you can take these needs, you can take these requirements that these end users have, and you can articulate them to the higher ups because you have that relationship with your end user. You're working with them on a regular basis. And you can get these needs implemented into your product standards. It's necessary. So let's talk a moment about how these product standards emerged. And we see product standards emerging in kind of a similar way to how we saw computer use change when we talked about the history of computer use changing way back in Module 1, with the rise of knowledge workers and the need and decentralized computing, with decentralized computing taking computers away from the mainframe on out into all sorts of periphery departments, and then these decentralized computers having graphical user interfaces that made computing available to people who weren't as technical as you once needed to be to operate a mainframe. It created a rise in the amount of people who work with information, created a rise in the number of knowledge workers. So it created a rise in the need for help desk. We see the need for product standards emerging in a similar way. When we talk about product standards, to just define product standards, what we're talking about is a list of hardware, peripherals, operating systems, network needs, application software products, everything that's out there that's selected to meet the needs of the end users. So it all goes back to that whole idea of decentralized computing and the knowledge workers and everything being out on the periphery. We have to support these knowledge workers that are all over the place so that they can do their job. And if you'll remember back to what we talked about, this happened in the late 70s and early 80s, and we have during the 1980s here incompatibilities among computer products being very, very common. Everything was proprietary back in those days. We didn't have we didn't have plug and play standards. We didn't have standardized serial buses for all of our devices. And vendors loved it. Because they said, if we can kind of get this vertical integration, it's an economics term, if we can get this vertical integration in this market, we can gain this market advantage. Because we can get all of our products aligned with this one device. And if we can get all of our products with this one device, then everybody who uses this device will have to use our products because all of the other products are incompatible. Or they could take a horizontal integration approach, another economics term. They could take a horizontal integration approach and they could say, well, we could make products that are compatible with different types of platforms so that when someone moves from one platform to another, they have to rebuy our equipment. Because that previous peripheral they purchased or that previous device that they purchased is only compatible with that certain object. So if they were to move to a different piece of equipment, they would have to buy a new peripheral. They would have to buy new software. They would have to buy new everything. So you can think about this being a real pain. It's a real pain back then, prior to computing standards. Everything was different. And it was real annoying, and it was really expensive. And there were a lot of problems caused by computer product incompatibility. One is that we had limited opportunities to transfer and share data among users. I mean, think about it. You know, we had this rise in decentralized computing. We had people all over the place. One of the things that we might have wanted to do would be to transfer data between some of these people that were all over the place, but we couldn't do it because the products were incompatible. 2 would be large inventories of parts that would be required to repair incompatible PCs. I mean, think about that. You know, if you were working at a help desk or some kind of tech support and you had to repair people's computers, you would have to have parts that were compatible with each different type of computer that you supported. Which means that you'd have to keep large inventories. You'd have to keep big back rooms full of all sorts of different types of parts, because you might need 5, 6, 7, 8 different types of one certain part to be able to support all of the different devices that your clients had. Which large inventories create a lot of headaches for people. Increased challenges to train and equip hardware service technicians to repair different platforms. I mean, you know, you can think about it that way. Like, you know, you can think about it in terms of like cars, right? Like, almost, you know, a lot of cars have some interchangeable parts, but, you know, most cars have different parts from car to car. So you have to be able to know how to work with and fix each of the different make and models of automobile. You know, and in the early 80s, that's what it was like with computers. Because nothing was standardized. Nothing was in the same place. You know, we didn't have, you know, and everything was just a little different. User skills difficult from one system to another. And, you know, we can kind of think about that today in terms of like, well, have you ever tried to use a Mac after you're used to using a PC? You know, some people can get on a Mac after they're used to using a PC for their whole life and just kind of get on there and go. Other people, it's like, oh, I have no idea how to use this. This is so weird. And it would be like that more commonly because, you know, whenever you'd go from an IBM to an Apple to a Texas Instruments to whatever you had, you know, they would all be different. They would all have different proprietary system quirks about them that would require a different learning curve from one to the next. Increased cost to support incompatible systems. One is that support staff couldn't be experts on all systems. You can't know everything, so you'd have to hire more people that knew about different things. You'd have to hire one person who was an expert on this, one person who was an expert on that, one person who was an expert on the other thing. And then you'd have to target training to specific platforms. So you'd be doing more training more often, which takes up time and it takes up money. Those are finite resources. Time and money. And they're both costly to the functioning of a business. So as you guys can see here, product incompatibility caused a whole lot of problems. So we started to develop product standards. We said, man, you know, we gotta fix this. You know, we gotta reduce these costs. We gotta make these things more accessible, more able to be worked on. So during the later 1980s, companies began to standardize a few hardware platforms to meet users' needs. And they began to adopt standard operating systems, i.e. Windows. And in the 1990s, they extended that to network operating systems. And then limiting the choice of application software to a few standard application packages in each software category. So the idea was to make this friendlier for the user, but also friendlier for the support staff. Because the more things that we, kind of the more different things that are out there, the more different things that we have to support. So it helps on both ends. So let's talk about some methods for evaluating and selecting computer products. Let's move a little past the history and the rise of standards. We've got standards now. So how do we evaluate and select computer products? The first thing we need to do is we need to define product evaluation. And we can define that as the process of researching and analyzing computer product features, capabilities, and the suitability to solve user-specific needs. And in my own personal opinion, that last point is the most important. I'm even going to take it, I'm going to underline that. That's how important I think that last part is. The suitability to solve users' specific needs, I would say, is the most important thing when we're evaluating products. How our users have a problem. They need this product to solve their problem. How does this product solve their problem? So we have a product evaluation process here. One is collect product information. Do your research. If you've had any other class with me at this point, the majority of my upper level classes involve some sort of do your research as a key part of the entire class. Do your research. Collect the product information. Figure out everything you can about said product. Once you've collected the product information, you kind of have an understanding about the product. You know the product intellectually. But that's not good enough. It's not good enough just to know about the product intellectually. You also want to test the product. You want to get your hands on that product. You want to actually physically test that product, compare and evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of that product with other products. Because you can know about things intellectually, but unless you see how they work, and unless you get your hands on them, you don't really know how that experience is going to be, and you don't really know if they're going to solve your users' problems or not. You can kind of assume, but you don't really know. And then based on the combination of knowing the product intellectually and knowing the product physically, comparing the advantages and disadvantages, you can then take and make decisions and your recommendations based on the information that you gathered from the first two steps. It's not enough just to know something intellectually. I'm going to reiterate that again and again. Get your hands on that product. If it's a piece of hardware, get an evaluation, get a loaner. Buy one and test it out before you buy 50 of them. If it's a piece of software, get an evaluation version. Take it for a test drive. Try it out. Actually get your hands on it before you make recommendations on what you think will work the best. Now, I thought this information was interesting, so I figured I would include this in here because it's important to think about this when you're thinking about making recommendations, because it's all about, what meets your user's needs. And what meets a user's needs has changed a lot in the last 10, 15, 20 years. So the title of this slide is called, Is the Traditional Desktop PC Dead? And in a lot of ways, yeah, it is. And in some other ways, no, it isn't. And my ultimate recommendation is it's going to be based on your user's needs. Because by and large, what we see is we're starting to see people get away from the traditional desktop PC setup. You know, back in the 90s, even in the early 2000s, the traditional way to experience the computer was via a desktop PC. However, we've had advancements in technology. Moore's law has come into effect. We've seen laptops go leaps and bounds in terms of performance. Whereas at one time, a desktop would have been the choice for someone who needed a performance option. Now there are laptop performance options that are available to people. And even still, if your user's needs are minimal, you can have something like a Chromebook, which can provide basic functionality at an incredibly low cost. And then we also have the idea of tablets, things like the Surface and the iPad. And, I read a study on those that say, in terms of computing for older generations, tablet computers are the way to go because they make more sense to them. Since they can physically interact with the screen and touch the things that they need to touch, the mouse being kind of a foreign concept. A tablet computer like a Surface or, something like an iPad would make more sense for that kind of user. And I have this Redmond magazine survey on here, which is a little old now. It's actually a lot old now. And if we were to redo this survey today, these numbers would probably be very, very, very different. Now, one of the things that we can use to help us make decisions on products is whether or not something is the industry standard or a best-selling product. Like when we talk about something like, it's Photoshop. Photoshop's the industry standard. After Effects is the industry standard. Microsoft Word is the industry standard. When we're talking about something being the industry standard basically just means that it's the market leader in sales, that it's the most used thing that's out there. So it's not a standard insofar as it's been held up by some sort of unknown organization as the quintessential product for this or that. It's just that a lot of people use it. So one of the advantages of using an industry standard product is that it can reduce support costs. Since so many people use the product, there's a wealth of information out there about it just on the general internet. If you go out and look up tutorials on Photoshop, you can find tons of them. But if you go out and look for tutorials on some lesser known image manipulation or graphics software, you won't find as many of them. And another one is that they're likely to be targeted by trade book publishers, training material developers, and support service vendors, for the same reason, because everybody uses them. So if everybody uses them, more people need these support materials, and they're more likely to make money on selling these support materials. So these support materials will be available to you. So you can say, well, I can get this product, and with this product I can buy all this ready-made support material, so I don't have to waste a bunch of time developing support material of my own, which is good. Now, some of the disadvantages include that it might not meet the specialized needs of some users, which oftentimes that's going to be rare, but that could be the case. And then the standards based on market share change over time. Things ebb and flow. What's the standard today could be something completely different in 10, 15, 20 years. So if you go all into this one product today, and the industry standard changes in 10 years, do you change with it? Do you hold the course? That's a decision you have to make. An example I have here is of accounting software. And I have, different types of software that different types of businesses might choose based on their needs. Like for a small business, they might select a mass marketing accounting package for for the reasons that we just talked about with industry standards. Something like QuickBooks. It's something that's available to the masses. For a small business, they're probably not going to need a lot of specialized features. They're not dealing in huge sums of cash or lots of different, employee payrolls, things like that. So it's, something that's regular, like QuickBooks, would probably be enough to satisfy their needs. For medium to large scale businesses, they would need to evaluate and select accounting software based on their specialized needs, because they could have multiple locations that they need to support. They could have special tax handling or international businesses. And, some of these specialized features might not be in a mass market accounting package like a small business could utilize. And then for very large scale businesses, oftentimes for them, they're going to need something that is customized to meet their unique needs. So they might need something built for them from scratch, or they might be able to utilize something that one of the large-scale businesses could utilize. As long as it's, maybe modifiable a little bit in that sort of way. Another thing that you can look at that's kind of interesting that you might not have thought about is products that are used by your competitors. Sometimes you can let your competitors do the legwork for you. If your competitors have already researched the marketplace and identified the strategic reasons for adopting certain products, look at what they're doing and copy them. There's not necessarily a reason to reinvent the wheel. Especially if you're in a highly specialized industry. Like software for automobile insurers or veterinarians that I have here. You still might want to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of the products that your competitors use. You might have 3 or 4 different competitors and they all use something different, and you analyze the strengths and weaknesses of all of them and find, what is the best software for you to use. But there's no reason to reinvent the wheel and try to start over from scratch when your competitors have put in the legwork and done the research to figure out what they need for the marketplace. Just take advantage of that stuff that's already available. And finally, I'll talk about a request for proposal. I think I'll leave this here because we're reaching the end of our time together. I don't like to go much past where we're at now. A request for proposal, to define it, is a product selection or competitive bidding procedure. And I've been a part of these before. You basically put out an open call, or not necessarily, or it could be a selective call that's sent to a group of people to send in proposals. And these proposals are for what their product can offer or what services they can offer, and how much they can offer that product or service for. So you're actually sending this out to different vendors to try to get them to come to you and say, well, we have this and we can give it to you for X, Y, or Z. We have this product which can give you this feature, this feature, this feature, and we can offer it to you for this price, essentially. And so at that point, we can take this objective criteria to select among products proposed by vendors, and we can award our contracts based on all the different things that have been promised to us. If you work in certain industries, you might be legally required to do this. I've said that, I've been a part of it before. Working in the public sector, if you have to do a purchase of a larger amount than a certain required amount, then you have to open it up via an RFP and take proposals. It is something that's legally required. And this can be an objective product and vendor selection tool because you're comparing against the vendors and what they have to offer and what they're promising you. It's kind of you award contracts based on your request for proposal. So you take what they promise you and you put that in a contract, and then they kind of have to deliver because it's in a contract. So as far as all that goes, you can't see anybody overpromise and underdeliver there, because you put it into contractually obligated services. So you end up with an objective product and vendor selection tool there. So I don't want to go too far over our time today, so that's where I'm going to stop with you all for today. I'm going to turn the music back on, hang out in the chat for just a moment, answer any questions if anybody has them. But again, that's all I have. So thank you for coming to class today, and we'll see you next time.